Dhammo Jondene Dujen Shenpo Nambo Yamo Zobe Ribo No Shopso Denbo Dewa Shebo Juten Chenpo Chebo Halo Jawa Nano Nebo Lodom Nano Je Dumbo Sanje Jonde Bejo Jojo Tobo Lo Shanze Lo Chudo Josu这个年做这段子所见的能广播电波，那年就点的能就接送的这个播就能上车，能到公出都做做一些叫做世界人物，超过几点送能了给我广播就年就能上车。先就电波正面到月球，先多找我就能上去。对着见着水波送梦境，我娘面去见就能上去。广播途径接电波，当街准备电波。是那云电叫做线，电线线那上去。大边的茶着我就给送的着。基督的道就不心觉就能相似，这年这月朗阳的老婆都能找得，先给当报应点点，给的朗阳相似，爹把这样的交情给我别送出国，让给3年用说的，爹年上的的报。干嘛找人忙没动，就忙死我去不。面浪落到真道不，对谁就能得到。是能得月堂起子莫言，过梦当年决绝着的。我当那当七月老主，随便做人着我着我。
Thus I have heard. At one time, the Blessed One was dwelling in the royal domain of Altar Peak Mountain, with a great gathering of monks and a great assembly of bodhisattvas. At that time, the Blessed One was absorbed in the samadhi of the many aspects of phenomena called profound appearance. At the same time, noble Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva Mahasattva, looking at the practice of the profound perfection of wisdom, saw the 5 skandhas in their natural emptiness. Then, through the power of the Buddha, Venerable Shariputra said to the noble Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva Mahasattva, how should a son of a lineage train who wishes to follow the practice of the profound perfection of wisdom? Thus he spoke, and the noble Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva Mahasattva answered the Venerable Shariputra with these words. Shariputra, those men and women of a lineage who wish to follow the practice of the profound perfection of wisdom should look at it like this. The 5 skandhas should be seen purely in their natural emptiness. Form is empty, emptiness is form. Emptiness is not other than form. Form also is not other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, recognition, compositional factors, and consciousness are empty. Shariputra, like this, all phenomena are emptiness, and having no characteristics, they are unborn and unceasing. They are not impure or pure, they neither decrease nor increase. Therefore, Shariputra, in emptiness there is no form, no feeling, no recognition, no compositional factors, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no appearance, no sound, no smell, no taste, no sensation, no phenomena. There is no quality of sight and so on until no quality of mind and no quality of mental consciousness. There is no ignorance and no exhaustion of ignorance and so on up to no old age and death and no exhaustion of old age and death. In the same way, there is no suffering, no origin, no ending, and no path. No wisdom, no attainment, and no non-attainment. Therefore, Shariputra, since there is no attainment, bodhisattvas rely on and abide by means of the profound perfection of wisdom. And since their minds have no obscurations, they have no fear. Transcending falsity, they attain nirvana. All the Buddhas who dwell in the 3 times have relied upon the perfection of wisdom and have become true and complete Buddhas of unsurpassable, perfect, and complete enlightenment. Therefore, the mantra of the profound perfection of wisdom, the mantra of insight, the unsurpassed mantra, the unequaled mantra, the mantra which calms all suffering should be known as truth, for it is not deceptive. The mantra of the perfection of wisdom is proclaimed. Teata om gate gate paragate parasamgate bodhi soha. Shariputra, this is how a Bodhisattva Mahasattva should train in the profound perfection of wisdom. Then the Blessed One arose from that samadhi and said to the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, noble Avalokiteshvara, he had spoken well. Well done, O son of the lineage, it is so. O son of the lineage, since it is just so, the profound perfection of wisdom should be practiced just as you have taught, and the Tathagatas will also rejoice. When the Blessed One had said this, the Venerable Sharadvati Putra and noble Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva Mahasattva and the entire gathering, as well as worldly beings, gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas, rejoiced and praised the words of the Blessed One.
Namadong Gombo Juzhen Jangde Yanglo Shangzi Lo Gangye Lo Zhu Zhenyi Zhenyi Nido Nando Zhose Zhenyi Degen Zhenyi Zhenyi Doga Lebon Zing Kando Sibi Zura Mari Dong Dongyen Zhenyi Dozo Gyula Buji Dozi Yang Lo Zhu Den Su Zhu Qie Zhu Nimu Nilu Li Zhi Zhao Zhu Zhu Zi Ji Ma Ri Mi Si Dong Yi Niu Gu Ji Ni Jun Zi Ri Zhu Nu Den Nian Do Ji Ji Do Zi Yun Li Do Ji Si Tu Yuan Gu Ju Zhou Ju Dong Ju Ni Ji Zhi Da Li Mi Jia Bi Yang Lo Di On Ara Ba Za Na Di On Ara Ba Za Na Di On Ara Ba Za Na Di Si Den Ju Ji Qian Ra Yu Zi Ji Da Li Di Mo Mi Ba Ra Si Ni Ga Dong Di Ji Yong Lu Du Bo Yi Lu Zhu Bo Bi Nong Zi Du Yan Zu Yan Sa Shi Du Yi Ji Yu Yi Ji Yan Mi Yan Du Zhong Yi Ri Ru Yi Ni Yi Ji Ni Yan Di Yi Ji Yan Bo Yan Di Song Yan Ji Yi Shi Yan Du Mi Yan Di Yan Bi Yan Bo Yi Do Yi Ge Yan No Yan Do Yi Shi Yan Lo Shi Yan Bo Yu Yan Ju Zi Lo Yan Mo Do Yan Bo Yan Ji Yan No Ji Yan Ji Yan Ge Yan Go Yan Lo Qi Yan Zi Yan Zhi Yan Zhi Yan Ni Ji Yan Do Yan So Yan Bi Di Yan Zhao Yan Zi Yan Mo Lo So Yan Ji Yan Chu Yan Ji Yan Zhao Bo O Yan Do Yan Dong Gu Ru Mi Zhi No Ya Yi Mi Ya Ba Dian Sa Yue Na Ma Zhi Bo Jin Da Ge Shi O Bin Di Di Shu Na Ba Zhi Qin Bi Guo Ni Ji Zong Di Gu Song Du Zhi Hu Zhu Zi Du Su Pian Zuo Ge Li Xie Yue Zhi Bi Gu Tao Yuan Zhuo Yue Zhe Wa Gong Ye Song Ma Li Xie Jia Qi Jin Zi Bi Du Xia Zhi Zuo Wu De La Suo Wan De Du Ji Qian Bu Di Xi Du Ji Jiang Chu Zi De Lo Ba Dan Na Ru Bo Bian Zhong Zhong Bian Ba Dan A Di Xiang Yang Li Xin Lo Ji La Suo Wan De Shambo Tome Yene Nangzhe De Chodien De Yue De Dang Chobe Seza Gesa Nunien Sunen Mo Jiajin Shube Jila Sowan De Jiayan Yume Shunjin De Zhuan Dawan Zhaba Zhibi Guzhun Jin Sanje Guzhun Baba Yaze Song Sama Dabi Jila Sowan De Xizhu Dabi Chonga Adi Shang Kadang Tenbi Mibun Zhongden Jin Nianzhu Nanshi Guji Song La Song Kadang Lama Nang La Sowan De 常见心的自己中国，我到这边我手接着的，当天边到不开中间，要是就把钱了送完的，就送滚的老妈多的。完了，刚的些年最重的，就当天幕我中存在边，之前老妈弄了做完的，让家送着一根拉大爷面，街上他把这边叫我去，在院这边他看在把眼，现在些年弄了做完的。借我更多用到那么多，这面去这边了同时间，撒旦浪就有点绕着呢，我就讲给我到小三节去当所节就那个。上九八多大年叫做节，老给去节这边做那节，到了平时上节主播修上节去，做节就那了，上九八多大年叫做节，老给去节这边做那节，到了平时上节主播修上节去。昨天就能了，想就把多当年就做，那个自己这边做那件，到了平时上街如果说，哎呀，的确，呀，当然这个搞的啥，你穷上的些那叫什么平去，你带来他人的些那，你花生的他话去，你带来他人的些呢，他也比生阶堂阶段，你做个上阶就公公特别切多，你带来呢，你知道的两个月生个去，就当说说个两的去交一去。给你们搞一个，给你们搞对。
좋아 그러지. 내내 도와. 내만 말 시지면 시되셔. I'm sorry, I forgot unmute. So I was kept translating, but without unmuting it. So yeah. So let's ask question to ourselves. What is the purpose of being here today to receive the teachings? Why I'm receiving Dharma teachings today? Here, answer to this question. So we should have answer ready to question. Answer ready for this particular question. The least answer to this question must be to have a better rebirth in our future life. And if you advance this answer to this particular question, one can then say, my purpose of receiving this teaching is to free myself from samsara or cyclic existence. if you further advance this answer, then my very purpose of receiving these teachings of the Dharma is to work for the welfare of other sentient beings, to gain this state of enlightenment. My very purpose of receiving this is to gain state of enlightenment for the work to work for the welfare of other sentient beings. This should be the most advanced answer that one should prepare oneself to ask to.
오늘 전에 다 세대 코너 항인 전자대에나 아니 대소 렌지잖아요. 다투기 단다기 숨바 타마티 토노라 이게 진짜 제게 인생인데 거기에 대받침이 줘야다는 매너만 줘봐지.
So as we are engaging in receiving of this teaching, the particular Dharma teaching is Mahayana teachings. So therefore, one must receive the teachings of the Mahayana by cultivating the third motivation that we talked about earlier. My purpose of receiving this particular teaching is to gain a state of enlightenment for the benefit of other sentient beings. Must need it. Must be cultivated.
네, 어나처럼 이게 단단히 가치고요서는 소소를 좋아지고요. 가서 돼서 내가 지요라 가라 나는 지지선데 되게 전화돼 매버제. 아니 강래서 시사선에 아니 뇌제 난가 되니라 좀 투비함불라. 아니 랑래 집에 남아 소리 권대체. 대라인에 랑게 친정거 되지나 달랑래 집에 남아서도 못해 남아 용수 좀 권대게지. 아니 대라 대양 다같이 가서 로모트네 슈샤 많이 봐. 아니 랑이라마 투 세와치명원에 지진바로지다마 지 손전 나지바선데 드리지긴데라 네 랑이 네 랑게 타여비 선제단지 네 대화대제 동행면 드리 강의 슈지에 손을 매져와진 네 단다 드리게 자이나마 다다긴 되노로라 네 맞소게 다 타나 가르쳐고도 선제다 달로로 가르쳐고도 세지 다때 녀쳐고서는 코를 내비소를 드리 토노로라 네 랑게 타고들라 드레스나 지다 아니 이제 내는 산업들 제도네 디징가 돌아다니게 된텔라니 대바 아니 말에 내는 슈발라 대바 내랑게 타고려 발라 이제 대바다 hin진이게 온게 아니 맞소기 체내지 제와이나 능문에 지부터 맞소기 강로 투제바나지 맞소 된 진도 니지 라네 슈도 마도나 고스버버 된 진로 투야야 레와도아.
So having cultivated these appropriate motivations, one is then now visualize with these motivations, one then visualizes in front of oneself in the space Buddha Shakyamuni, surrounded by all those lineage gurus, Lam Rim lineage gurus of one's direct the teaching from whom you have directly received or the indirectly received the Dharma teachings from those the lineage gurus, and imagining that all of them are looking at you compassionately and delightfully. At the same time, you're visualizing yourself being in their presence, surrounded by all sentient beings, without exceptions, and having a strong motivations that I will take responsibility to help entire sentient beings to be able to establish them. May I be able to establish them to the state of complete enlightenment. So you are actually committing yourself in the presence of all those great beings, that you will be working for the welfare of other sentient beings. With this, one should try to cultivate a fervent faith towards one's visualized lineage gurus, and then having a compassion towards all mother sentient beings.
다른 시마타바나기지 아니 미바 세보임베 단달라 아니 가마송스지 미바 책인다.
So with this instruction, let's take these instructions and take 3 minutes to meditate on it.
당가 저 강 경로 체바지는 안에 강선바셔 주 네, 상조 랑제는 바스 아니 저 강사티 상제 영내 제신 받지바 세지 강사 강요로 개체마셔야지 단대지 강사 진인신셔라 난가들은 로 거겐치 더버다 팀비토네 송샤조지 근데게는 사송조 주면서는 뒤중 가서 아니 집에 담바 속에 아니 가져 넣는도 안 되지 셈바셔 주
So with these motivations, one is then receiving the teachings of the great deities on the stages of the path to enlightenment, which is the instruction, unbroken instructions given by the great masters to their followers and so forth. So this is the kind of instruction that one need to follow. And it is given that this particular, great deities on the stages of the path to enlightenment is such a, instructions. It's given in such a way that whoever would like to, would wish to achieve liberations, in other words, free from samsara or the gained state of complete enlightenment, the instruction that is given in such a unique way that whoever can engage in this practice, following this, instructions of the great deities on the stages of the path to enlightenment, it will really enables one to gain the spiritual realizations right from the beginning, from the initial stage, all the way to the complete state of enlightenment. So therefore, this is the kind of instruction that everyone who would wish to gain the state of enlightenment must travel.
문에 전화 가서게 약간 배드 제목으로 그래서는 지로 단단 가서 거기서 보고 시에서나 소데 쇼게네 건다 받은 대형하게 놓으셔 코로 정정래 비제다네 근데 그 이상원도 손에 아니 다 토마메도 단다 받을 세상 되게 근데 지 이상원도 손에 네 단단내 건 늘지라야 다가랑 코네 되어라 다 과세 계시 마셔와나요 다 델레지 셴바지게 나 아니 이지 셰비기 마시기 때문에 아니 지 잠을리 제트야여 세나레 텐다 테모 연수 저거 제트야여 오늘 컨텐츠 거래에서 나와이나 또 되지기 허전지랑 좀 주어라.
So up until now, from the beginningless time, the way in which we lead our life is completely based on following our sense consciousness, the five sense consciousness, in other words, forced by those five sensual objects, and forced to engage in actions actions in pursuit of gaining those sensual objects, the five sensory objects, the five desired objects, the five desired objects. So this is the pursuit. This is how we endeavor ourselves. So from the beginningless time up until now. So now, what is required for us is here now, is not only let ourselves remaining under the influence of only a five sensory consciousness. Now rather, one must take an opportunity to try to take a time to really to focus on our inner, mind, the mental consciousness, in other words. So this is why this is for this purpose, why we are here today to receive the teachings, sorry.
되게 정말 저서도 세리바 춘적이 단단한 속에 내가 제대로 못 채워야 되는 공개 나시 영어도 쉬는 내가도 제셔야 되게 나오여 말이었어. 딱 가는 것 쪽으로 해서는 아니 윤리 나시 되네. 아니 조 인데니터다 조 좋아도 단데 돈도 소아이나 아니 미신이 다시 되는 내가 때문에 되는 것 쪽으로
So His Holiness often, emphasize and make a remark. In other words, by saying that we have always remained under the domination of our five sensual objects, five senses. In other words, five sense consciousness. It is whether we are, ordinary person or lay people or even the practitioners, including, scientists and so forth, are always all remaining under the domination of this five sense consciousness. Now, His Holiness has advised that it is a time for us to begin with, to focus on our mental consciousness, how we can really bring about change within us, how we can really achieve as we long to achieve. This can be done only on the basis of by focusing on the mental consciousness, not letting ourselves remaining under the influences or under the domination of five sense consciousness.
단단 가서 지 나고면도서 가린 나고면도서 라서나 아니 세계에 공부 당하는데 나고면도서 소에 되래도 또 세계에 공부 당하는데 열성지 그거야나 된주기 라서 가르치는 주고르서나 또 미통 라서 지에서도 거지그래 미기면 통배 세계에 되진다디 주부터 세단데 바기 냐뉴토는 송상의 지기 제스만도나 다시 개명하잖아 아니 인지메지 세단데 바기 조베 산제네서데 아니 세den지 주부 담비 용로 콘두제네 아니 대다게 냐뉴 사생에 되라 아니 라네도네 랑가 테마도 민도아 단다가 수시데.
So now just if we remain mere under the influences or under the domination of our five sense consciousness, so this is not adequate, what His Holiness has remarked very often. It is not adequate, in other words, it is not adequate remaining yourself under the five sense consciousness and pursuing for achievement of the everlasting happiness, which is not going to happen because it is not adequate factor. The sense consciousness is not an adequate factor of providing the lasting happiness that we normally seek. So what he has now suggested, His Holiness has suggested, is now if one is looking for everlasting happiness, this needs to be done on the basis of transforming one's mental consciousness, not letting ourselves remaining under the sense consciousness, but rather one should try to focus inward and try to understand one's mental consciousness and develop the mental quality. It is by development of one's mental quality, one will then be able to gain the state of happiness that we normally seek. So therefore, when speaking about the developing the mental consciousness, mental quality, it is not something that can be seen. It is that can be experienced by our own eye consciousness and so forth. But rather, this should be followed by the teachings that is given by the great masters of the past, the great qualified spiritual masters of the past, including Buddha Shakyamuni. So therefore, this is how we should embark ourselves on the path which really leads ourselves to the state of everlasting happiness by developing a mental quality.
다 된적이 전에 당한 속에 거스 봐봐야니 주고 쩨바 때비신 제법이 저와 동비기 계제의 시자와이나 나 저기 단다 거스 법의 중 친이 제에게는 내게 제법 보이는 장군을 좀 봐봐 챵바이나 시도지 집어 담바 코로나가 송 장으로지 되지 날해져 좀 두고 송데 지 너무 코로나가 송여로 좀을 쇼래와다 라바데 심바마지 끼가 시대잖아 잔이 진루촌이 시에잡이 좀을 쇼래와다 라바 심바마지 끼가 시대잖아 힘만에 저러뭐지 따와데 다랑 여러 인자는 대려서 장으로지 날해져 좀 송돼야 돼 아니 영어로 정말 참고 이제 지중 코너 다가랑 코너 세두기 제가 전마다 오미 따와데 지로 회사기 난가려 돼 다가랑데 세미 인터넷 가족이 되게 콘도사기 아니 지 라메지 좀 지라니 맞아 겨워서 베토네 체내체 거서 봐봐라
So with this, we have covered the first outlines of the greatness of the authors given in order to show that the teachings has noble source or the immaculate source. So here, if you look at that, Lama Tsongkhapa's text, whatever the works or the composition or the text that is composed by Lama Tsongkhapa, many of his texts that you will find in many of his texts, by saying that one should not be satisfied by reading a few philosophical texts or the deities. One should not be contented by that, but rather one should expand one's mind and try to go through the entire teachings of the Buddha as much as one can. Teachings of the Buddha as much as one can. By following the great Indian masters of Kendru Chonyi, which means there's 6 ornaments and 2 cardinals. So one must follow those teachings of those great beings as he followed himself of those teachings of Nalanda masters. As His Holiness pointed out many times, one should always, if one is practicing Buddhism, or if one wants to study the teachings of the Buddha Dhamma, one should follow this Nalanda tradition, the studies of the Nalanda traditions. So therefore, at this point, we are also receiving this lineage, this unbroken chain of lineage of the teachings of the Buddha Dharma teachings. So therefore, we should feel ourselves as so fortunate to be able to have such an opportunity to receive the teachings of unbroken chain of lineage. So here, as we talked earlier, that the first outline is already covered, and then it will begin from this now, second outline, showing the greatness of the teachings in order to engender respect for for the instructions, and the greatness of the enabling one to know that all teachings are free from contradictions, the greatness of the enabling one to understand that all of the scriptures has the instructions for practice.
Teaching Kasa Jokana Tene Jawa, Senje Jama, any Tichibitse, any Senje Chokazon says. Tano Jiba Senje Chokazon to Delaji, Senje Chokazon to the line, Doba Mataba Tabashibito, and Kasa Tochi, any top Nyambashi Kasa, Doba Mataba Tabashibito, and Dama Toban Manyamba Sonze, any Nyambashi on any, other Nipatela, any Damba Manyamba, any. Conducting a song or a singing. And I was Shanchu Sengi Damba de Len, Shanchu Sengi Damba Lene, and Manaba Kanja Songare, Katu de.
So we are on the chapter, the particular chapter we are, is under the headings of having received the Bodhisattva's vow by means of rituals, and how we can maintain by not weakening our Bodhisattva's vow. In other words, the bodhicitta, Bodhisattva's vow. So this is the chapter where we are in right now.
Mason Jitela Trasi Damba Sons and Dada Dambaris Taba Sonsi the Sensons around it. Sensonsi the Kanja Songers and Matu Jeda Peja in a Chala de Yabuda Chala de Sachamoyana, Yabuda Javare. They are not Sensonsi the Carrera Sesson, Saint the Union, the Parent Hakosona, and Saint the Low Marawajana, Yansen Yande Jero, the regular Senson several number songs.
So what is meant by protecting our precepts or the vow? How do we protect our precepts? It's literally protecting our mind. Not letting our mind engaging in any kind of negative activities, negative thoughts. And we're refraining ourselves from cultivating negative thoughts and emotion. That is what is meant by observing or preserving our precepts of the vow. Just like if you have a very expensive, a valuable object, so you know that the value of that particular object, and you will do your best to protect that object, right? Not letting it go. So you will protect that very carefully. In the same manner, when you know how beneficial it is for you to protect your mind or preserve your vows, then you automatically, have the courage to protect your vows and precepts.
Tamato Manaba Sonsi the line, send the Manaba Sonsi Jedam, and the Joashima Pension and Manaba Sonsi Nidoa, and the Shanchu Sengi Dambatali Nika Godoa, Sota Dambayana Chiche.
So now when it comes to maintaining this Bodhisattva's vow, right? Maintaining this Bodhisattva's vow, not unlike the vows of other vows, such as Pratimoksha vows and so forth. Rather, when it comes to the Bodhisattva's vow, we're not only maintaining and not weakening this Bodhisattva's vow this lifetime alone, but also our future life. It is unlike the other vows such as Pratimoksha.
Mats Joashima Pension, the Jetela, Napi Jis and the Jisudo, Napi Jis, Joashima Pensiola, the Shanchu San Kanicha Yangosana, Napi Jis, the Mode Chesona, and the Joashima Pension, Shanchu San Jun the Nail, Nogre Sondoa. So
we have gone through a few of this, right? We talked about the the 4 dark causes which weaken one's Bodhisattva's vow in our future life, right? So one should always try one's best to really to look at it and then refrain from not engaging in those 4 dark vows, dark causes.
The Napi Children of Tombotella, any Taki Shen as or the any Sinjaka, Sinjela, any Jun Gokota and the Chile do Amazo, Kelo Don, Ginesundo, Conje Rangi Chechailamas and Taki Shen as or the any Yantabi Sinjeta dollar, any See Gokoto and any Sanchu Senya, Jichire do, what was Shana?
So there's a one way in which that out of those 4 dark practices or the 4 dark causes that cause us to weaken our vows, Bodhisattva's vow, is to deceiving one's guru or spiritual gurus, or as well as deceiving other sentient beings, one's fellow sentient beings. This will become one of the cause that weaken our Bodhisattva's vow.
Nipatela Matsu Katushia and Jopatele do Jopasedi, Jenja Gawa do ne Gawache Dingetela in Jamada, you're just an Mataka, see you go on a Tenechana, Nick Gawan and Jobachi. ngato senju no le jopa singede na jopa singede chin chana kono tere do loma de so ro ni zando ko megyo chola jopa cheso na gyowa cha ro ni gi chu duela jopa cheso na megyo cha ro te chidi kasa na chi ni ba de gyowa chenge ye kansa de la ni jopa che chinge de ni kasa na chi ni ba de do.
So then the second dark causes which that weakens our bodhisattva's vow is the regret. One of the regret that we should not be regretting. You know, if one encourages, or if one tells someone who is engaging in a virtuous deed, and you deliberately talks about the faults of his or her virtuous actions or virtuous deed, and letting him or her go through great regrets and remorse. And that is not right. So therefore, the regret can be here. In other words, the regret, according to the epistemology of the Buddhist texts, the regret is actually a neuter. It is nor virtue, neither non-virtue. However, the regret can become a virtue or the non-virtue, but depending on what kind of regret that you may have.
대연체의 가슴 아주 배세도 로자는 단다 조바생의 가슴 미션 되게 저라마서 되게 단다치 도도내잖아 아니 제 겨 중에 지라 아니 제시단 담만다 다요지선에 단담만다 쳐네 아니 거기와는 조바치제데 나치 니바데 가슴 안에 되게 좀 와서 로자 다 소망고 쪽이다.
So Rinpoche said that he went through this the regret because he doesn't remember whether he has explained that. We just read through the text, but he doesn't remember whether he has explained this. So that's why he's covering that again today, because the regret is that what is meant by regretting is you are just letting someone regret upon his or her virtuous deed. Is one of the factor for weakening one's bodhisattva's vow.
당연히 로이다. 테바 쳔볼라 양도바 슈비 신체나라 노하바소 마와라스 유네 손도.
So now we're on the page 77, second paragraph, right? Speaking disparagingly, etc., to beings who have correctly entered the Mahayana. Some says that object is those who have the spirit of enlightenment, having adopted it through its ritual.
되게 된다 가르세나 상추 센터 덴발라 카땅바 데레도아 나서 계속 카토시에서 상추 센터 덴바 양나 상추 생게 담바다 댕엔지라 아니 콘담르레스나 카땅이지 데레도아 근데 상추 센발라 고아다바.
So this particular, the phrase, which actually explains, emphasize on not to, speak disparagingly of the bodhisattvas, someone who has already generated bodhicitta. So it has a great, consequences where we need to experience, we need to face. If we were to engage in, such a divisive speech regarding the bodhisattva.
Yune sondo. Choke senche zone dembala kachi yeche. Kachi senche na tata medeyang jawan dede. Dene dotan gaye metedo jebane shanchu semba sheba zangle seka majongo. Gaujien de shanchu sembe damde lobala te chenla yang daba shuba sheba mombo nana senje da demba ne zong ge san nyamo de la ji xin shawa ne son do de de do ju do jere do.
So now here it says, some says that the object is those who have the spirit of enlightenment, having adopted it through its ritual. Others say it is equally those who have previously developed the spirit of enlightenment and do not currently have it. So this latter assertion contradicts the sutra, and it's wrong. The commentary has simply a bodhisattva with no further clarification.
Te tani nge lao de ko ta sa yu de la ka she yin de ka she du su chen na lao du sa do da rang lu rang la she sa na ne shang chu san ba rang la ngun zi che wa do ne ka de shang chu ze da de nian ka chen bo shu re nga so ju ba dang ba la ka dong se de ju ba dang ba ga ye me she ne ne ka sa chu zo nyang ba che da re se shu song ya ro de che de nga so ge so so ngon la ne tu ge ka re sa na ne ji ka sa kan re ji yin na yang de le ji ma ha ba dang ne ko ta ba de chi cho gu me do da da de shang chu se ge nyang ji yu ji zo she sa de ne shang chu se ge dang ba dan dian ba ne shang chu san ba rang la ko de do.
So here, not only that one should not speak, badly about others, with negative intentions. Not only the bodhisattvas or someone who has bodhisattva's vow, but also all sentient beings. In other words, because where it says we do not know who is bodhisattva, who is not bodhisattvas. We're not capable of judging whether that individual is bodhisattva or not. So therefore, one should refrain one's best to not to speak badly about others. In other words, refrain from speaking or the disparaging other beings. That is what is meant by it.
Nga tsu ki zang tsu nga tsu xie ge ji ka re se nga tsu ki yung ka ji so na nga ka zong ma re ge de ri chi lo se ma re ko la ri chi mo pe nga tsu chu tan ji prang ga mo shu ka ni so je se ka se chi so de de ri ko ma na so je yo ma re ko ka tu ko no rang ye ji na sa je le pe ji xie de so ni ji ro a de je de ji chi ro ni so ya ka se de ma go de ni de mo go de tu jo mo du so de ja chu mo du se de ri ko de jing le ma re de la ri chi mo de jen de ro ma.
So if you look at the Lam Rim Chenmo, the text Lam Rim Chenmo itself is such a unique text that when you look at the subject matter of the text, it is, arranged in such a systematic way. It's not that you will not really become disconnected with the previous chapter and next chapters. When you really go through these teachings very carefully and read carefully, you will see how systematically ordered when you look at the chapter of this Lam Rim Chenmo. Very continuous way.
Pena ha ko so ata nga so tombo te la ni kan ji sin je jan ngo ko to yi zhen la ju me do ni ba te la ni ya bo chen la ni je ba che che da ran yi te la cha do che me do ni so ba te la ni ju ba tam ba sang ju me che ba yin ne kan sa yin ten che te da la ni kha ba ma yi ba ju ju me do ko wa ta ye me do e yin ji mi je nga kha sin she ra ma se ge me do la ne to ya ta ran do.
So now here, this is the direct instructions which anybody can practice, right? It says one should not, deceive Buddhas, bodhisattvas, and then it goes to one should not deceive sentient beings, right? And one should not let others, one should not deceive other beings, whoever they are. And then it talks about we should not speak speak badly about other beings, including bodhisattvas and so forth, right?
Da de de da ji shi de la ji shi sha wa ne se de da shang chu sen da de bi kan sa de na la ni da da na bi chu de ka le che wo se so na ni de de gi shang chu sen da de ye kan sa de la ni ma ba ma ba wo so do a nga so ya bo ma yin ba la ba ka ta ba.
So therefore now it says the one of the 4 factors that weaken our bodhisattva's vow is speaking disparagingly, speaking disparagingly, and etc. to being who have correctly entered the Mahayana, which means referring to someone who has this bodhisattva's vow or who has actually cultivated bodhicitta.
Dici. Dela ji shawa ne mha ba so ma wa wo ji. Shedang ge kyu ne la ne joba go ba sheba ne jeba da tyen no. Yu kan la ma wa la ne shang sen la chu de de ni wa na tie chen le me ba du ba de ba do bi she de de da la ma wa je be she jang de go wa shi ge chu ban zhao wo song du. Dela ma ba ma yin bi zhan ne song du.
So here it says, even though in other scripture contexts, there are many statements that those with the bodhisattva's vow who are learning the training, who are learning the training are the ones who have correctly entered the Mahayana. I think that here the object has to be understood as any bodhisattvas, starting with those who have generated the aspirational spirit of enlightenment.
아주 대단한 데로 변화 상주선의 대행의 상주생이 남바의 대행의 아니 태바 첨벌하는 수준 로더 영역에 인지민가 상주적 고만 타위 인생이 간사지라 아니 가서 제시 담을 전에 아니 더더 초에 말에 지지 수군 고고래 지지세지 담을 때네 아니 된적이 하나 따와 중에 되려라 내가 첨벌해도 제가 다른 뭐셔야 되지 빠게 도저 로니우로다 장다 조셔 체셔대 아니 상주 선바대 미 루자 타도가 타이베 선제 타제된 조베 상지지 고모 타번 되바 임바 간실라 아니 이제 시험을 전에 아니 거기 따와도 줘야 돼 아니 단다기 거는 고스법에 코레도.
So what is in this particular chapter mainly emphasized is that it's mainly emphasized, discouraging someone engaging in the practice of the Mahayana, someone engaging in the practice to achieve complete state of enlightenment for the benefit of all other sentient beings. So someone who is engaging in such a practice, if we interrupt that practice, or in other words, if you, if you just give him or her as the wrong instructions or wrong interpretations, or by saying that such approach of gaining state of enlightenment for the benefit of all other sentient beings is not possible. In other words, it is not a right way of approaching your spiritual practice and so on and so forth. So this is what we should not be done, because if we do so this will be the one of the factor which weakens one's bodhisattva, the quality of bodhicitta or the bodhisattva's vow.
되지. 내가 하바 많이 비자네 손도. 난 생년바 진시 샤와 답 님이 말에 니 미마셔봐. 줘봐오. 내가 맨해 봐네 손도. 렌세 도도도.
So now here it says, what is done to those bodhisattvas to speaking disparagingly with blame, with libel, and so forth. The assertion that what is said has to be motivated by the hatred accrued with the commentary. But even though the commentary says that the bodhisattvas to whom it is spoken are diligently speaking the teachings, and words are spoken in order to stop their belief in or wish to practice the Mahayana, it seems to be enough if they understand the meaning of what is said.
제가 가족이 베비기처럼 한번 줘봤어요. 때라 또 말아. 근데 한번 많이 봐줘봐. 근데 매년 봐줘봐서 돼. 줘봐 많이 봤으니까 손도 제단자. 처음에도 제가 대체대 코로 넘어셔야 되지. 벤 뭐도 쇼바 녀발라서나 녀반데데 되게 샤워를 근데 미마 샤워되네. 제용의 시샤서는. 그럼 잡아 쇼바에서는 미션을 손봐. 아니 뒤서도 가도 던지지 제발해서 나와서는 줘봐 많이 봤어요. 아니 숨어 던지잖아요. 그 단나 카동서
So there are now here it says we are, speaking disparagingly of someone, not really relating to his or her quality. You're talking about something that is not really done by that individual, whether it is actions of the body, speech, and mind, and so forth. You're just misinterpreting that his or her practice, or blaming him or her, and speaking disparagingly of that individual. So this is what we shouldn't be doing, because if one engages in such actions, will then become a cause for weakening one's vow.
peche tengi ma lo kwa ta pa ma yiba jibi dhatjan do nga tsui ngenpa shi shawa tabu nipi mi ma sheba joba shawa ji je menye pi dhane sa ma tsaba shodo sheba tabu mi ji shene joba o je ta joba ma yiba sengi de joba ma yiba namba de tan de saba she tabu namba shene joba tan chi je ma yiba hama sonje taja de joba le she do sa 대랑 장난은 좀 아니데 님이 저 신도 체대 도디바 가서 한 도디 주세라 제양 손도 대바도 로라지다.
So it's a commentary explains that something disparaging is, for example, saying that he or she has poor character, wherein you do not mention any specific faults or blame. Is, for example, saying he is not celibate, right? Wherein you are specific, and at the libel is, for example, saying in this or that way engaged in sex, or making it more specific. The commentary attaches the term criticism to these three. I've already discussed briefly the danger of this great offense, arising in us.
됐지. 딱 한손을 조인해서 게 단지 추치라 이봐 데려와. 맞좀 배 가서 가서 라니 레전베 생각을 간지 라니 가보 가전지 따내니 제달을 대단히 통무통게 돼. 지수 통무 제가 대세 때는 맞아 간지야나 레사시 데려와. 세부 세장을 때때 예전에 된주기 노트지 용하게 바로볼 줘야 되면 줘도 따셔. 네 잡대도 소소 나지되게 잡대체 근데 바로 줘야면 따셔네. 카드는 땅인데 근데 레드 슈치고 슈 사거서 맞아 가서 좀 매동 가서 태연하게 매동 제세네 나르는 배터리 잔에 소로와. 자고 신던데 자고 샤워 소야로와.
So here now it is saying that I've already discussed briefly the danger of this great offense arising in us. It is possible, all of us, right? We are. It doesn't take much effort for us to really to criticize others. It is not that. It is not that we need to put in rigorous effort to criticize others. It doesn't take that. So it is very easy, and we have, in fact, that we have a natural tendency of blaming others and criticizing others. So according to the text, where it says that we should not be doing that, because this is not a right way of doing as a practitioner. So therefore it says, because now when we are thinking about criticizing others, speaking badly about others, our very actions of that speaking disparagingly to other is supported by the ngarjin, which means the self-grasping. The self-grasping is the backbone of engaging in such a negative acts. So therefore, one should not let oneself to be controlled by our self-grasping mind. So therefore, in the Namde, which means that the teachings and the Pramana Vertika, where it is stated very clearly by saying that we cannot really say someone who is noble beings who are not noble beings. It is therefore, it is like the fire covered by the ashes. If you're unable to see the fire underneath, an ember, in other words, under the ashes, if you step onto it, it will burn your feet. Similarly, we do not know by looking at individual, we do not know what this person is noble and this person is not. So therefore, one must always be very careful of what we are speaking about others. It is therefore the entire subject that is to be taught under the category of Buddhist epistemology in the monastery. It is a pretty vast subject where you should not be speaking about something that you do not know very rightly, or you do not know based on reasonings. So just by you haven't seen, or just because you do not know, because it doesn't really appear to my conception, you cannot say that doesn't exist, and so on and so forth. So that kind of subject matter is taught in the monastery. It's pretty vast topics as well. Awesome. So now here it says, indeed, if bodhisattvas have even a despising thought towards other bodhisattvas, they have to stay in hell for many eons as a moment of that thoughts durations. And the sutra on the magic of the final piece, Parshana Vishachaya Pratitara Sutra, has that not others' actions apart from the slandering others bodhisattvas can make a bodhisattva fall into the miserable realms. The verse summary of the perfection of wisdom in 8,000 lines says. So let's take a break here.
당연히 된 저기 수고죠. 오늘 대해서만 로고 산다. 양간이 치된 저기는 저도 좋은 거로. 아야. 다당간이 이제 저기 도로에 되는 도상. 변에 상추 선바지기 상추 선바지라 카탄송이나. 아니 지 계치기 장단년에 개발을 소바 녀완내 거 봐다. 양 상추 선바지기 상추 선바지에 손의 제고야나. 아니 상추 선바지기 상추 선바가 카탄는 마도 상추 선바는 손의 제도고 말해서
So, as we are all, it's pretty clear in the text where it says, indeed, if bodhisattvas have even a despising towards another bodhisattvas, in other words, other bodhisattvas, they have to stay in a hell for as many eons as the moments of the thought's duration, right? And then also Sutra, it's also mentioned that that no other actions apart from slandering other bodhisattvas can make a bodhisattva fall into a miserable realms. It's pretty clear, right? If one bodhisattva talks bad about other bodhisattvas, or there's no other action that can make bodhisattvas fall into a lower realm or the miserable realms, apart from, speaking badly about other bodhisattvas.
Gogo so she tetabi country samba jetan cheba tetan je keba jene long jogo ba sonde shanchu le shindo rinwan jo de shir control number tangje de gaba dan shona demata shaba dan dombala be gote denile sondo.
So if the bodhisattvas who have not, let's reading through the text, okay? Let's read through the text. If bodhisattvas who have not received a prediction of their enlightenment have an energy dispute with bodhisattvas who have received the predictions, they must put on the armor of practice again. It says, for as many eons as the moment of their course, faulty attitudes. Thus it says that they must travel along the path, starting over again for eons, commensurate with their angry attitudes. They become very far distant from their enlightenment. For this reason, stop your anger on all occasions, and if it arises, immediately confess it and strive to restore yourself. That same text states.
So
this is, what here mainly talking about how negative consequences that we may face by engaging in, by disparaging and talking badly about the bodhisattvas. Because in fact it says they must put an armor of practice again, which means if one bodhisattvas who are on the level of path of accumulation, path of accumulations, would engage in such a divisive speech or talking badly about other bodhisattvas, other bodhisattvas, he or she's bodhicitta will weaken and again begin from. It must be practiced, because his or her bodhicitta is already weakened. So again, he or she must engage in rigorous practice to be able to be on the level, that level he has already achieved earlier. So generally, we have a saying that there's no intense negativities as the negativity of anger. There's no difficult practice as a practice of patience or the tolerance, right?
보투고 말해 샹추스 생제대로 이제는 소소기 뒤진에 얘네 거지 컨트롤로보다 라니 지제네 지 책임 받으면서 러 마서나라 근데 라서때 러베네 대가 계속 러 차이는 될은 줘버지는 샤도 제거에 소소이 라네 되로 인치미진 가서 샹추스 생제 알아다고 말해 뒤진 거로만 생겨 너도나라 매제달라 지 책임 컨트롤 책임 받셔야 담아도 제 삼번은 담아도 제한들은 뭐 용도 되는 거라니 카투카 아니 되게 계속 제사와이나 제가 샤다지는 백을 손도
So here now, as we spoke about earlier, that we cannot identify whether such individual is bodhisattva or not, because speaking about bodhisattva, someone who become a bodhisattva is entirely depends upon the development of his or her bodhicitta. And when speaking about bodhicitta, it is not something that can be seen through our eyes. It can be heard, it can be felt by our body's consciousness and so forth. Right? It is a mental quality. So therefore, we do not know who is bodhisattva, who is not bodhisattva. So therefore, we should always refrain ourselves from engaging on those divisive speech against other individual. Not speaking only from towards the bodhisattvas, but also at other individual in general. One should not speak badly about others. So if somehow you have spoken badly about others, or you have disparaged some, speaking disparagingly about other beings, as soon as you notice that, as soon as you knew that you have said something bad about that person, you should immediately have a regret and remorse, and then commit yourself not to engage in such divisive actions in the future. That is what we should be doing as a practitioner.
제가 데려 가서 배는 가서 그 제단에 로장 치제는요. 쇼랑긴데 랑지라 또진이 뭐 제마타 다제 마룬 셰베나 센터도네 도바셰 생이 드르기 님이 통네 카투 까도이지 뭐네 세기 님이 통소데 소소기 소소 가르래 거를 소생 가르래 거를 살아이나 드르기 컨트롤러 소바기 마룬 바데 해소나 나사까 퇴기 그거 렌토나 다 소소기 계속데 렌셰 바로 왔다.
So it is therefore we find in the 8 verses of training the mind, right? You should always probe your mind all the time. You should always examine your mind. As soon as you find that there's a negative thoughts taking place within one's mind, you should always, avert immediately. You should always eliminate immediately, because this negative thought will endanger yourself and others.
되지. 다니가 저기 나르게 가서 태어나게 매동세에 배수지 배다로. 저당 가서 태어나다 괜히 생이 되고 누자 다세지로. 얘나 드르지 노야 참아도 원은 이데 드르지 노로라야 집에 담바 가야 시가 말 소야 되로. 그래서 배서고 배면서 개체뭐 근데 지금 아니 그 뭐시가 코트를 지지를 쇼바가 세대다 소소하게 놓치 마도 피게들 자체에 배 온세대 로아 소소 마통비 전체적이 이니 레스로 셔야 되려도.
So therefore we talked about earlier that in the text of Dharmakriti, where in Paramahansa, where he has spoke about one should not be talking badly about others, one should not criticize others, because we do not know whether that individual is bodhisattvas or not. Just like the amber or the fire, which is completely covered by the ashes, that you thinking that there's no, without knowing that you step onto it, it is a great danger. So similarly, we do not know. When speaking about the bodhisattva, it is a completely developmental mental quality, something that cannot be seen through our eyes.
맞아 라네 또 그거 뭐도 배나 강도 수도 로비제 다니게라 메다시세디 주부 담바기 센시신 디와데 버치는 전조는 냥총 진의 진행전은 로딩이 지래도 다 나인스 단등에 상주 생이냐래 간에 메시아 샹라견더라 이제 또진이 뭐지 다시 말해서 강도 수도 다니게라 메다는 게 네 그게 뭐예요 초보라 Tende nolo nga so tatang chi ki to nolo pige de chese ro da tongjo ro ta na nyanga chambo yasaro.
So here, there's a great danger for us, because if you look at the mind training again, 8 verses of the mind training, one should train one's mind, right? By looking at oneself as a lower than others, which means being so humble. Asking us to be very, very humble, because that is what they have done, those great mind practitioners. Those practitioners have gone through that. And so whenever we associate with someone, or whenever we are being along with somebody or someone, or in the gatherings, one should always look at oneself as a lower than all of them, lower than others, which means emphasizing being a humble. So therefore, we will find a lot of humble people without knowing their inner quality. So one should be very, very careful and refrain oneself from engaging in such a negative expression, verbally or mentally and so forth towards those beings.
Unegi lani dangi na so kadang phano chno yoro ben biba sengde ni meje ne bi ni chireta ni lade nye se ki meje no ne bi dong en de ba sang je meche ba den yoro meje bi sana jidan je den ge ta dang de la bet kono meje ne bi dong en de do nyale kono to ne.
So therefore, if you look at the great instructions of the Kadamba, the dharmas of the Kadamba father and sons, where they have spoken very strongly about when when you develop your practice and developing your spiritual realizations, you will be you will not be included among the other normal human beings. In other words, this individual will be more physically or mentally being completely isolated with the other beings by behaving in a different way, totally humble and very, very, down to earth. So there's a great chances for us, we as ordinary beings, that we will have such a, look at individual, in a negative way. So we have to be careful with that.
Sende zawa minya jemba jishi jin soso chaba xie jin shijan dongxie la gawa mishi dene sanje chun de lobo xie so xie dang la gao xie na shamba da ni ji maye tu chung den zhuo xin rin de yang jang sha jang ha me sa de jie gao wa zhuo ye shang chu sen ji zawa che la gechen shedang ka ne ma sheba ta jana jewe jeche pe ne seme ban ro de nang de le metin shu ju ne me na sen la de da ni de ju shedang ga shi ri ding ma ma yi sa ben le ne pe wa jin je wa la su lo de da gong ban je ne ka na ne she so song du.
So that same text states, develop mindfulness thinking this state of mind is not constructive. Then face each instance and restrain yourself from doing it again. Do not rejoice in it. Train in the teachings of the Buddha. If you give if you give hatred a chance, the love and compassion you have developed will weaken, and it will be hard to develop any new love and compassions. Even if you practice for a long time, thus you cut the root of spirit of enlightenment. If you stop hatred, the unfavorable condition for love and compassion, and cultivate love and compassion according to the previous explanations, they then progressively increase and eventually become limitless. Dharmakirti's commentary on the compendium of valid cognition of Pramanavartika, which states, if unharmed by that with which is incompatible, love naturally comes into the mind. And also, as you familiarize yourself with the attitude of compassion and delight, which increase from the seat of prior similar experiences, how could this attitude remain the same?
동보 되게 생기 tempa 매겨와 해서는 가동체 아니 되게 생대 게이쇼라 아니 강도 두두지 아니 로그레 에세데 렌세지레도.
So this suggests whenever you find that your mind is about to govern by negative thoughts, or it is already governed by the negative thoughts, whenever you find that, then try your best to get rid of that negative thoughts and try to cultivate positive thoughts. Turn your thoughts into the positive way, in other words.
되지. 맞을 때 샴비 카테텔 다 컨트롤 시에다로 샴비 카테. 인산의 시에다도 컨트롤 될래서나 아니 니지 슈뱅에 자고래 니지 투충으로 그래. 아니 계시 니지 강고나라 로라 장가와다 아니 공부 때 땡가와여서도.
So because here now the opponent, the direct opponent of our love is kongdo, which is our anger or hatred. Once you have this anger and hatred within our continuum, it will harder for us to cultivate love and compassion. Even if you make an effort, so long as your mind is, so long as there is a generation of hatred that has taken place within your heart, and it is not easy for us to cultivate love.
Also, Karina Dora, dans soba sanchu send ne yete rangile che yin geshin ne tiye de rangshu je chang yong ge rangshu chang na lo de gongpian de ro lo de chuni ro song do.
It is natural, but if as long as you have gathered all those favorable conditions for development of positive thoughts, in other words, the virtuous thought, then there's no obstructions. There's no other obstructions can stop from developing such positive thoughts or virtuous thoughts.
Chidang asu dero pena lo gi demba se gro kanje lo juba de lo pa de se na ko kan yo ba de nya na de de ma so ko le chiba chena se ro yo mare kesi chiba chena pu de zo do re ta lo den te che so na chiba do ne se ro ne ani 지금은 영어로는 또 봐 컴퓨터로는 산재살은 로세 지어로 맞고 이 점바 연소나 점백이 부탁해요 말에 그 다대체소나 미바데 라도로 되디 그로 튀쇼 인자네 튀쇼 이들 양양데 때나 사변되게 로데 컴퓨터 양도 로고서 나르기 시티 데레노 제와라 소바데 컴퓨터메데 포여세로 이제 산재에게 된다라 이제 그 투메데 포네 이네 산재 살로 지지신 와라 디지 가서 조제 투지 공을 내세.
So it says when you think about the wrong thought and correct thought, in other words, if you follow the wrong thought, as you examine the object of the thought, it becomes bluer and bluer, and you will not be able to actually identify that particular object that has been apprehended by your wrong thought. Whereas the correct thought, if you follow the correct thoughts, as you examine, as you probe further, the object of this particular object of this particular thought, the correct thought, will become clearer and clearer. And finally, not only that becomes so clear, but also even the thought, that very thought that you have developed towards that particular object, which is the correct thought, will then be able to transform into a non-conceptual thoughts, non-conceptual consciousness so that you can directly engage with the particular object. So you can, in other words, ascertain directly without any involvement of mediation. So you can directly engage with this particular object and so forth. So that is what is meant by, because the wrong thoughts and the correct thoughts as the function is completely different here, and their objects are different.
맞게 셰거에처럼 나르기 리파스는 아니 양다도 로바스네 셰고 양다도 로바라와 데 로바치라 가세기 대소나 콜레 뇌바친제 주 뇌빈 주 친체라 크기 젠트 네트야 코요 말이 콜 계시 자샤나 잘라는 마서 배줘모도 자샤나 자샤라리마도 기조 동소나 쩔해고 다 로이 한타바 그리스 타바데 가세기 기조 동나 세르세르로 세르도니 로기 연대데 공바타면데 벤네 산제살라 조에 여레 여마레 세데 소 아니 세리기 유일 주 이게 세나테 여레 세나테 여마레 로바레 네바 여레 네바 여마레 세 제바기 제사들 니레
So therefore, we find in the still the same text, the compendium of valid cognition, so the permanent of right ego, where it states that Yangda and Lopa, which means right and wrong, in other words. So just simple translation to it. Right and wrong. So if you really follow the wrong thoughts and the actions that is followed by the wrong thoughts, it will always prove detrimental. It will always prove harmful, in other words, no use, in other words. It will not become useful for us. Whereas if you follow that correct thought, the right thoughts, this will always take you to the right thing and will become a beneficial for oneself. Not only that, by means of developing and progressing and enhancing those development of the right thoughts will finally take yourself to the state of complete enlightenment as a development of right thoughts or quality of the right thoughts.
Yeah. This is not a never shoot. This one, Jango, Samari Patti, so Kisha said, Samari Patti, you can't, you look. You will be next to the name and Chebache, Lotte Yanda, Lopa imitated, so you can sit down the Yiki Tatan Conoton, Chebache, you get Tatan the Zentate, turn the timber in Sona, Lot Conditas on the Yard Reche. Any Loba than Yanda, my impact in Sona, any Colo Combatasona, any Co Sheba Senate, Cojula de Consate, do the way. This is the you will be next to Conogon and Chambachana, Consul Zangi. Once you shall said the New Bombo Jenny Jello Soji Maimba. Chibi Jason Tony, Consul Zangi Ton to it, Tamay, but the Tamari but the word is only.
So therefore, it's always emphasized on whenever we engage in the practice and receiving, following the teachings of the Buddha, one must do so by applying a valid reasoning. There should be a valid reasoning or rationale behind one's practice, not just mere believing and having mere faith. Rather, one's belief and one's faith must be grounded upon the valid reasoning. That is very, very, very important. Because here it says, when you follow the valid reasonings, and valid reasoning will give rise to the valid cognitive event, in other words, valid consciousness, or valid consciousness. And when the valid consciousness arises within us, then whatever object that has been pursued by the valid consciousness, it will accord with the reality. The actual object of apprehension of the valid consciousness will always accord with its reality. Actual object of actual existence of the mode of existence, in other words. And by familiarizing oneself with that particular object, then one will develop one's, valid, consciousness, will take oneself to the further, spiritual realizations. If one is engaged and followed by this wrong thought, invalid thoughts, in other words, invalid thoughts, then the more you cultivate it, the more harmful experience that one may receive out of that. So therefore, when speaking about practicing a development of compassion and love, we're not merely talking about mere religious belief or just mere faith. We're really talking about here now, think about the valid and valid and not valid. Whether it is a valid reasoning behind it, whether it doesn't have valid reasoning behind it. So it is completely based on the reasonings. We're not mere talking about just mere faith.
다 된리게 타니체요데 인지미주 출루다 따루다 조타세데 계세시면 고아제 아니 가르사 다 남비전의 집에 체리세너에 아니 사마 코로나토는 유래 제바데 출루 이메 계세마시아제 잠비쇼는 조아도에데 아니 제바체는 조아도에데 셰용데 근데 강갈을 그에체지 레소에데 된다 데레도아.
So it is therefore, without touching, His Holiness has mentioned that without touching any religious faith, it is always try to examine your thoughts, whether your thought is valid or not, invalid, in other words, valid or invalid. And then examine carefully, in other words, examine thoroughly, and by means of such a critical examination, one will then be able to conclude that this is the valid thought that I must follow, which will then give rise to a positive result.
됐지. 다 되게 가서 가서 나비치선에 나치 손바데 아니 다 간제 샹추 셈발로 수비 주부 담바 아니 가사잖아. 한번 아주 많이 봐. 아니 카톤 주고 말해서 나치 손바데래도 다시 받는 거 중이다.
So now we have up until now that we have covered third dark practices, which becomes a cause of one's weakening of one's bodhisattva's vow. Now we will begin with the fourth dark practices.
저도 요시라 녀와시비 라비 삼베 마이발라 저도 그게 요 다까지 요지시네 장라 삼바 나다이 토네 야가마제지 요지제네 네 바로 볼라 네 흘러다 셔바지라 네 저도 나치 집어들여도 나치 집어들여셔.
So now the fourth is an absence of sincerity, right? Using deceit and misrepresentation to get the service of others.
다 파쇼기 나 가르사 파쇼기 유텔로 고고도서 세너리에 간지 유테 가르레스 아니 신진 제 강연으로 와서도 유네 신진 제 강연으로 와서 내가 지시시는 요지 쇼바오 소도.
Then it says the object is any living beings other than yourself. What is done to this being?
요 가르스나 제 라선에 진짜는 제베시도 셰도지 요전에 대선을 주시바 소다 제와 예정이 라마도 발라 홀라 떼누스 동시에네 시 라마 제데 켈람바타베 소노 켄틸레네 소도.
Then here it says, what is done to this being? You act with deceit and misrepresentation. Sincerity is explained in the commentary on the Kasyapa's chapter to be your ordinary attitude.
지단은 가도 되러 배는 지단에 나가서 요지 세대 배도 요지 천 세대 takono deshi woden chewmendo ta labi samba chene se de senje ranje se tujin yang jamon chen yang sondo da ma so senje shibi ranje de shangze ranje de sondo de do samba ranje labi samba chene senje ranje de se de senje ranje kono jemenge ye namba taba jiro ina ya tela zoche jane ani yode jige zoche jane doja so ya chile segudo.
So therefore, His Holiness has always mentioned that when you look at our nature of our mind, our nature of our mind is said to be more compassionate and sincerity. So therefore, it also says the similar things over here. It says sincerity is explained in the commentary of the Kaspayat chapter to be your ordinary attitude. Deceit and misrepresentation are the cheating while measuring with the scale and so forth.
코로나를 배셔 코로나 것을 되고도 라선의 삼발 라신은 되베셔서 섬비 라신데 라상게 라신에서 해마 슈버기 삼바치 제단에 때 인거는 삼비 라신을 해셔나 상제 살을 로토마 때때 처음도 제단 가도 요지세데 됐어버려 가서 지 별에나 힘도 있나 좀 좀 뭐에나 맞아서 서시요 말어 제제 ni teda ta san so do ta ka ji jama cha go na re je je go na re ka hi ge jama wala chi cha de shen cha de ju ye da ani je na chi ma bi de zo ye de do就说了je da san de de yo ji che de ji de le yo da do.
So it is when speaking about not being sincere and misrepresentations and misrepresenting and so forth, as we have been saying in Tibetan, that's in Tibet, when we, engage in the trade relationship with others, they have a saying that normally the trade relationships are done on the basis of measurement. They have a certain, container that can be measured their grains and, the crops, whatever they're trading, the merchandise they're trading in. So by they using that with container, that when you are giving to someone, you just use a smaller container and giving to someone. But when it's time for you to getting back that whatever that you have loaned someone or the grains and so forth to someone, but when it's time to get back this loan, when someone is repaying that loan, you're using the bigger container to say that this is a container that I used to measure the grain that when I gave it to you. So this is, the one of the example of not being sincere.
Tati oi te ka pedo de ya ko ma so ta kyule tile ne nika la chapi on ki shwa de cha dan timu karong ki cha to den dawa la yo ne ma je ne son do je dan yo je seng de cha de timu ki cha to ni nika kan je ko lo yo je chang ye 강사 코너기 파쇼될 로지 챙데 강사 되니 nika la chapi on ki 파쇼될 양네 요와 제버 양네 주 제거 son do.
So here it says now, the deceit and misrepresentation and cheating while measuring with the scale and so forth. And it also says it is, for instance, like sending somebody in order to get them to go to, and later asserting that they might as well always go on to the other different place. So therefore it says Asanga's compendium of knowledge, Abhidharma Samuchaya, where it says that both the deceit and misrepresentation arises because of attachment to goods and service, attachment to good and service, and are similar, included in the category of either attachment or ignorance.
Jidang 가서 뭐 가서 녀녀 노로래나 지노로라 단다 요지때 지다 코로기 장신데 네 대차다 때문에 차도에 son도 그러니 다 주세대가 소파도 카지 손지 고로 전년도 엔데 메진도 여바템 바탕 요네 장게 녀바 정안을 손데 근데 정안에 장게 녀바 터지 명어바 시바 오 손도 요 주세 요의 전이 소소게 된다.
So now here we says the meaning of what is meant by what is meant by absence of sincerity, or using deceit and misrepresentations. What says now? He says that deceit is to present that you have good quality, that you do not you pretend. He says that deceit is to pretend that you have a good quality that you do not have, right? You're pretending to have a good quality, though that you do not possess such quality. That is what is meant by deceit, yo, in Tibetan term. And the misrepresentation is a gyu in Tibetan, yo, gyu. So there are two different, two syllables actually have the two different meanings. So yo and gyu. So now then the gyu comes here is, and misrepresentation is hiding your fault. You try to hide your own faults, your own mistake, right? You try to hide that. That is what is meant by misrepresentations.
되지. 다데 나치 주바 레도아. 간제 라니 경로 도자기 도나 나주 현다 제다 레가 현다 지제소는 파쇼될 요지 차그래. 로.
So therefore it says
다까지
using some method to conceal your fault. That's all.
당가 까치도 마테스 로긴다. 까비 취제래서 까치 동비 유네서 선제요도 말 선제요노조 샤와네 소라 가서 텔라 소강 타나 시기지 시양 시진의 줌마와 방바데 대다시나 랑게 켄라소 이체바젠라 준중고고 고고와 미종모 까치니비 유네 손도.
So now we're beginning the training in the precepts to adopt the 4 light practices. So previously we talked about the 4 dark practices. Now we are going through the 4 light practices, which keep spirit of enlightenment from weakening. So here's the 4 second consciously lying to any living beings, whatsoever, even in jest or even for the sake of your life. The object of the first of the 4 light practices are any living beings, and what you do is forsake, consciously lying even for the sake of your life, or even in jest. It is in this way you do not deceive you do not deceive special object of your actions, your abbot, master, etc., with lies.
되지. 되나 나초 동부 예니부 다랑 차그러와. 데라 gemoshobe 된다 천절에 진하고 말해서 근데 간제대 나초 동부 예니 니에보 되지. 가데 송거에 다랑 송국으로 와다.
So here it says very clearly, by forsaking consciously lying to any living beings whatsoever, even in jest, that it says, even in jest. One should not do so. Yeah, one should not lie.
다 난치니 까치니 비유네 손양 선제 당제 도어제 샤와네 대달로 요즘에 봐 합이 삼배 네바테 삼바 정보 네바오 데네 나치 집이 네보 손도 나치 집한테 단다 요지 심마 타바니 봐.
No. So then the second it says, not deceiving but remaining sincere to all living beings. The object of the second of the four light practices all living beings. What you do is not deceive them, but maintain your sincerity. That is remain honest. This is the remedy for the 4 dark practices.
되지. 때 뭐가 기면도 되지. 아니 나치 손비 유네 손도 양 상생 탐지 도 손도 샤와네 덤바단자인 디시제진 대다게 된 내정 한바 수주저바오 손도.
So now this it says here, third one is developing the idea that all bodhisattvas are the teacher. The object of the third light practice is all bodhisattvas. What you do is develop the idea that they are similar to the teacher, and the voice in the four directions praise of their characters. So this would be the remedy for is the remedy for the third dark practices. This would be the remedy for the third dark practices. Because if you're able to consider that developing the idea that all bodhisattvas are the teacher, and an object of the third light practice is the bodhisattvas. So you will not have any criticism. You will not have any criticism towards any bodhisattvas. So this will become a direct antidote or the remedy for the third dark practice.
타치 때문에 년에 제고도 제메토가 게임에 제게인다 세 근데 당자지자 당자자비 돈에 이 당자때 아니 랑도 도와라 이 가서 로치스 줄랑서 랑라 바지고 소나기 아니 근데 년에데 유마나 인디노 집에 라마나지 신조로도서 근데 라마다랑자와 타예비 선제되다 아니 때도 대화지래 이거는 제마로 제토가 된 게 되잖아요. 용사래다 세게 삼발로 천원예비 돈에 뭐가도 뭐잖아. 오늘 대래라 제면도
So now just take our time to reflect one's mind upon the qualities of the bodhicitta, and think about how wonderful it would be that I can cultivate such a precious mind within my continuum. It is only the matter of my effort. If I really make an effort to engage in such a practice, it is not something that is impossible. Thus, I must engage in the practice of bodhicitta, practice of developing bodhicitta. From now on, I will commit myself to engage in such a practice. As we have a saying in Tibetan by saying that, Lo Chusutowa, my mind must be, exist in accordance with Dharma. My Dharma must become a path to liberation or state of enlightenment. That my path should not have any obstacles or the embodiment. So therefore, all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas in the 10 directions bless me to be able to do this.
Sadhan lan ju yun de lo zo ne do ji chang ge go mo nyan do shu ye don gu ru min de la guan de yang da ya mi de ne re do be le so ni ne ka da yang ba ga shi sa ba de lo ne mo re ge don zhong当真家业红波到九节，天马顺别财绕更多。江边养着财位接送呢，天边人把跟上弄去。年年主别接纳你是说，让给之间多别浪去。主张财位张月讨给钱，若月一节面包实现。家业天把有人人就接。天把人情出给马家，家家娘把举别说的呢，你这真的也。天天天天是我西巴说，世间家业没用成的。来住上就浪就人别讲，堂着那就一浪来的。家业这帮人都讲究起，浪上主别拼钱主席。眼见世界没当没命，跟财到更多家园阿婆，浪当着我们就接，康脆的把酒了去去，最近住了怎把电源菜，多点能就大多出席。这些将是出根交酒节，就在那面过在上天津，能够听的数据节目。老上点别正面杀双节，若也明色大多年久节，帮着绕月过月新方式，偏当电话马林中月呢，现人人往天在家做，小别身体不多天久节，江边抱怨只大钱包，更多上路天阳天见的，大根据结束道路。夜晚得到堂前劳动我，就送西边家话堂前，我刚了出多我把的，那些个月早晚的给，从不是劳动。哎呀，推荐呢，给你们推荐。
Chi Rinpoche.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.